Welcome to Unexpected Points. Kevin Cole here with my co-host, dear friend, and Broncos country Let's Ride supporter, Josh Hermsmeyer. We got a trade, maybe trade, chalk of trade, thoughts about trades of Brandon Aiyuk. But as we like to do here, we'll concentrate on some of the bigger lying issues in addition to the specifics of this trade. Before we get into it, Herms, did anyone call you Herms?
A couple people.
Herms?
I'm ambivalent.
Herminator? How about Herminator? No? Okay. All right. Is this thing on? I feel like the comedian here. Is this thing on? Okay. So I wanted to talk about personally what's going on my front here. Not only is it training camp, but I'm kind of also entering a little bit of best shape of my life season right now. So I don't know if that's going to affect the pod or not, but I got some competitive juices going with some soccer that I've been getting into recently. Herms, how are you looking as far as the physical capacity going into this season? Are you ready for this NFL season?
You know, I've been mowing my lawn twice a week, so the legs are in pretty good shape. The swing is rounding into shape. So at the golf swing is looking pretty good. So I wouldn't say best shape of my life. I'm pushing 50 now. So that would be hyperbole.
How about best shape of your midlife? That's what I would say also.
I mean, best shape since COVID.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a little bit in the future. I assumed when it came to lawnmowers that you would have some sort of sitting riding setup in a vast expanse that you're working with over there on the compound, on the Hermsmeyer compound.
Yeah, no, I have one of those electric deals, Ego, and so I get a little bit of exercise with the Ego. It's pretty quiet, so I can listen to my audiobooks and your pod once in a while. And so no, it's a good time. I enjoy the mow. Enjoy the mow.
Yes, yeah, and as Evan Silva, the great Evan Silva, that's part of getting in touch, touching grass, mowing grass, being near grass. Although he was exposed on, for those listening to the ETR podcast, that he pays someone else to cut his grass after mentioning like a billion times how important that was to the manliness of his NFL projections. All right, so let's talk Brandon Aiyuk. The story now, we're coming into something that's been a topic of discussion since I don't know when, since probably before even the season ended, as to what they were going to do with Aiyuk going into his fifth year. It seemed like the 49ers were going to play hardball, not accede to any of his trade demands. Yet now we have the quote unquote hold in happening during this offseason, which has been surprisingly effective, I think, for players, either generating a trade or more often than that, getting a contract extension. It seems like in this case, and again, we're reading a lot of different tea leaves in different directions, and maybe Josh has a different opinion than I do on this one. It seems like in this case, the extension is not a possibility unless the 49ers are putting this all out there to get parameters from a market they think might be a little bit cooler than what Aiyuk wants, and then we'll use those parameters to extend him themselves. Because the reporting now is saying that they have negotiated a framework. This is according to Matt Mayoko. I don't know how to pronounce it. Mayoko, over at NBC Sports, that they have a framework of the trade compensation, which reportedly has players involved coming back, which is, you don't see that often in the NFL. So it makes me a little bit suspicious of what it might be, of whether these are really genuine or not. But so they have trade frameworks sealed for either the Cleveland Browns or the New England Patriots. And again, tea leaf reading here was that the Steelers were part of this process, that Aiyuk seemed like maybe he was best with the Steelers when it came to contracts or concerns, but they effectively are no longer an option, according to this report, after they declined to meet the 49ers trade demands. Do you want to speculate at all as to what this means, all this different talk that we're getting here? Or do you want to just stick to the parameters of how much he may be worth and whether this is a good deal for the 49ers if it happens, and think about what the compensation should be?
Well, it's a tough spot for teams that want to trade for Ayuk, right? Because they're going to have to give up probably, I imagine, what the 49ers are asking for, given that teams have passed, like the Steelers, a second, maybe more. And
Oh,
in
I bet it's a first. I bet it's possibly a first round pick. I mean, I don't know. How do you think about this versus AJ Brown? I guess maybe.
right, I think Ayuk is in a tier below, but he's still young and he's been wildly like his surplus value on that contract has been fantastic for the Niners. They have to be happy with that. This is actually the first year where the prospect of paying him any real money comes into play. And I think they're happy with paying him his 18.5 or whatever it is that he has guaranteed on his fifth-year option, um, because they're first in the league in cap this year. The Niners are. So he's in a perfect situation from their team planning perspective. Like, you want an Ayuk on your team. The teams that are trading for him, no one has the situation that the Niners have and the fit that the Niners have with him. So I was always very, very bullish on him staying because it's just such a perfect fit for everyone. The problem, of course, is that as you alluded to, or as you actually mentioned, is that teams are more willing to and players are more demanding of getting a new contract after 1 or 2 years of either overperformance or performance at a level that's not commensurate with the guaranteed money that's left in their contract. And so these renegotiations are happening more and more frequently. And so that's become the problem for the Niners is they don't want to extend because that wasn't part of their build. I kind of respect them for sticking to their guns, but I just don't see the fit with these teams that are being bandied about. I think we've heard about now the Broncos, or excuse me, the Browns and and the Patriots. The Patriots make a little bit more sense, but and we can get into the Browns. I actually have some notes here about their situation, and there was talk about Cooper being moved. Really interesting with Cooper. Just a few weeks ago, they converted his salary, which is not guaranteed, to a signing bonus, which means they're now on the hook for his entire year, his last year with the team. They added void years. So he's got 4 more void years, 2 more added, 2 previous. So they're going to be paying the ghost of Amari Cooper for the next 4 years, 8,844, something like that. For the next 4 years, the Browns will be. And so they have this sunk cost to him, but now he's got this veteran minimum salary, right? His P5 is like what veteran minimum. So he's a tradable asset this year. But the Niners don't need cap relief. I mean, he would definitely be surplus value versus paying Ayuk. Ayuk is probably a million in surplus at 18, something like that. I mean, these are just rough numbers. Whereas you're paying, 2 million for Coop. I mean, that's massive surplus value. But then you're stuck in the same position of having to figure out what you're going to do at the wide receiver position after next year if you're the 49ers. So I don't understand how that works. Like, and then from the Browns perspective, like, you're giving up Coop, who you're paying for. He's a sunk cost, but you're paying for him, and you're getting in return a guy you're going to have to pay 30 million a year, maybe. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, I don't know. What do you think about that whole situation? I'll go further.
Yeah, no, no. I think my initial take is pretty similar to that. Like, if I were going to rank order which teams make the most sense, let's say to sign him to a long-term contract. Um, I would probably put the Patriots at number one because they have Drake May at quarterback. And we don't know anything about him, so maybe it'd be premature to make this sort of signing. But we've seen, building a competent receiver group, which they very much do not have, you know, in New England. Putting that around someone like Jalen Hurts when we talk about the AJ Brown trade, right? With Hurts and then Devontae Smith, they brought in there. They had Dallas Goedert. That helps a lot around that sort of quarterback. So I'd probably put them first. I mean, perhaps I would put the 49ers second, but that would be contingent on their willingness to probably trade away Debo Samuel for very little compensation. So I think that's one of the problems here. I think they're staring at their offense and they're saying we're eventually going to have to pay Brock Purdy, probably is what they're thinking. And as as we saw when we discussed these contracts last year, I think it's just a done deal. Like Purdy hits whatever bar that's been established, very meaty, very low-ish sort of bar has been established for this binary of basically tying or being at the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So you have that. You have Deebo Samuel on a contract. You have George Kittle on a contract. You have Trent Williams on a contract. He's getting a little bit old here. So we'll see what ends up happening there. You have enough where you're probably saying to yourself, I don't know if we can have everyone on a veteran sort of contract. And of course, they drafted a wide receiver early to maybe bring someone in there. I don't know. If I were the 49ers, there's an idea that their best move could be to say, let's not get too wrapped up into trade compensation and go ahead and trade away Deebo Samuel, maybe even take some of the cap hit away from someone else to make his contract a little bit more attractive, and then try to figure out a way to have Brandon Aiyuk. So that would probably be second for me. Then like I guess the Steelers would be next, and that seems to be where he wants to go. But I like their quarterback situation makes me think like, what's the point essentially
I
of
don't
going on
understand
there?
why he would want to go to Pittsburgh. Like, what is
I don't
drawing him
understand
there?
either, other than perhaps they are offering the most generous contract, and I think they would have some room for that. Perhaps there's something, maybe it was a Mike Tomlin, maybe wants to play for Tomlin. Maybe the Steelers have been a very successful organization for a large number of years, although they also have a reputation, at least, as being somewhat of penny pinching because they're one of these old school owners. I believe we're talking about the owners that are, I don't know if they're the original owners or an ownership group that's been there for the past 50 years that has sold off parts of the franchise, including to David Tepper. That's how Tepper kind of stepped his way into being an NFL owner. He's been selling off parts of the franchise for a while now because they just don't have a lot of money. So, yeah, I'm not quite so sure about that. And then when it comes to the Browns, we can discuss this in more detail. This, to me, if it's a real thing, if you're saying we're going to take a $20 million dead cap charge on Amari Cooper and send him away, who's pretty useful, what upgrade are we getting for Brandon Aiyuk? It just smells like we're really just desperate to do something this season, and we really, really need this Deshaun Watson investment to pay off. And we're running out of time, essentially, for that to potentially happen. And we're just throwing caution to the wind, as they have quite a few contracts there who already have a lot of dead money in void years, where they're doing a lot of can kicking over there without a lot of benefit to some of these contracts, especially the Deshaun Watson contract. So it seems like throwing maybe good money after bad a little bit in their situation. But teams do that, and teams are willing to do that, and they have an owner who has a lot of money. So potentially, I think he might have also come into the NFL via being a minority owner in the Steelers first before he eventually became the Browns owner.
So I think with the Browns, what's interesting from my perspective is that, so I would do the deal for Aiyuk, I think, if the 49ers valued Coop in a way that they were willing to take only a 3 along with Coop for Aiyuk. I would do that deal, I think. And the reason why is because it gives you optionality. You can, if you don't like what happened with Brandon this season, or if Deshaun Watson just completely fills the diaper, then you just want to eject from the whole build. You can get a 3 back as a comp pick, let him walk. I doubt they do that based on what happened with Jerry Jeudy.
They probably have to have a contract, right? They probably have to be extending him as part of this deal, I assume. Or Ayuk's not going to go there, right? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's the part I don't know. So that's why that's the part that no one really understands. Is everyone talking to the agent for Aiyuk? Are they hearing 30 million a year? Are they hearing, some crazy numbers, 120 over 4? Like, is that what they're hearing? And
presumably, I think that's presumably the case. Now, I mean, I guess in the Browns, like the reason I'm saying that they could still be willing to give it to him is because they would just structure it like they've structured all these other deals and be like, okay, it's only going to be a minimal cap hit the next year or two, and then we're going to load on a $20 billion dead cap hit in void years, 5 years from now and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why I think it doesn't happen, right? I think I don't see how this works for the Browns. Just based on how they've been acting with Amari. Like, I think the Amari contract looks really good for them. Like, let's say that Deshaun isn't good this year again. Amari's a tradable asset. They can start a reasonable rebuild by trading Amari away and getting some picks, and maybe trying to move on from Deshaun. I don't know how they do. I think they have another year or two of madness with him if he's no good. But if they go in with Aiyuk, I mean, they're just doubling down, as you mentioned. And so I just don't see how that works. And I agree with you. The Patriots seem like the very best choice. They have the second most cap in the league this year. So they can afford to take on Aiyuk, and they have plenty of cap in the future. So I think that makes the most sense. Question is, are they willing to give up all the picks? And are they willing to spend all the way up to 30 million? Because I don't know what your valuation on Aiyuk is, but I have it somewhere around 20, 21, 22. And if he wants 30, look, when you're building a team, you don't have to get surplus value on every player. Like that's not necessary. You get surplus value on certain players so you can overpay or pay market for other ones. And wide receiver is certainly a premium position where you should be willing to do that. I just don't know if I'm sold. I'm being a very evaluator now, but I'm just not sold on Aiyuk being a $30 million a year kind of guy.
Yeah. So let's talk that. Let's break it down into different pieces. So let's talk value here for Aiyuk. So I'll reference some of the numbers that I put together for this plus minus calculation that I have on value, which is mostly based on, it's a combination. It's like their stats. There is some PFF grading in here. There's less PFF grading than there are for positions where we don't have a lot of stats. It's looking at historical on-off field EPA splits for receivers. It clusters together all these different receivers. It puts them into historical clusters going back to, I guess, 2006 that we have this data for, and then tries to get an estimate based on like how good the receiver has been, how much was he worth. So for Aiyuk, he had an awesome season. There's no doubt about that. So if we go down to the top guys for last year, and this is why I had Tyreek Hill being the most valuable receiver, and he was a little bit over 40 points per game. And this is over more of a replacement level type of player as opposed to an average sort of player. So if we're talking about like from a win perspective, you think of wins as being, I don't know, it depends on what you regress it on, but normally the point differential for a win is somewhere in the 30s. For one win. So Tyreek Hill is worth, a win and change. CeeDee Lamb was second. Amon-Ra St. Brown was third. And then Brandon Aiyuk was basically tied with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then as you go further and further, it's Puka Nacua, Nico Collins, DJ Moore, Mike Evans. And eventually you get down to guys like Justin Jefferson, who on a per game basis, because he missed some time, Justin Jefferson would have only been behind Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb playing with pretty poor quarterback. You try to disentangle what the receiver does from quarterback, but it's pretty hard to do, right? Even if you're looking at historical on-off splits, which presumably are with the same quarterbacks, it's kind of hard to do. So the thing for Aiyuk is his contribution last year was good enough to be we're signing him $1 more than whatever the biggest NFL contract is at the position, right? Because that's kind of what they do a lot of the times for this. So that's part of it. But the larger context is Aiyuk is someone who people have liked for a while. Matt Harmon has been a big backer of Brandon Aiyuk's in the past. But it was more like prospectively, he could be this guy that he was last year. Last year was the first time he was that guy. If you look at the historical numbers here, again, I have him being worth a little bit over 30 points last season. In 2022, it was 12.6 points, 7.4 the year before that, 6.5 the year before that. So this is a 1-year deal for him. Whereas CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously Justin Jefferson, those types of guys, even DJ Moore, some of the other guys who've gotten some big contracts there, have been multi-year players putting up elite types of numbers. Brandon Aiyuk is 1 season. Brandon Aiyuk is a very high efficiency player. He has few routes compared to a lot of players, a lower target share than most players. We're talking about someone in the mid to low 20s as a target share. But he was getting these massive plays that he was making, which either that means he's really, really that good, or more likely, at least if you look at correlations, year-over-year correlations, more likely there's going to be some regression there versus what he done as a target. So I don't know. I feel like even for Aiyuk, if you just look at him in a vacuum, regardless of what team he's going to, there's at least some evidence that you're buying high on Aiyuk right now, right? Like, how much better could he be than a top 4 type of receiver, especially when he wasn't heavily targeted or this usage wasn't through the roof with the 49ers last year?
Yep, agree with all. Agree with all. I think that has to be some of the trepidation from any team that's been talking to the Niners, and that's probably why they haven't been able to find a good trade candidate. Along with the fact that they probably want a lot in return, especially if there's no player coming back.
Yeah, I'll say though about the Cooper deal. Um, I think that, and I think you seem like you're probably in agreement with that. I mean, I think like that would be fantastic for the 49ers if they could get like good trade compensation for it. You were saying maybe they would get a third back. I don't know. I feel like they could probably get more than that. Only because if you think about Amari Cooper playing with a struggling Deshaun Watson, Flacco, we're talking about a guy who can sling the ball down the field in Joe Flacco, but I don't know. His efficiency actually wasn't quite as good as some people may think. Last season, they were winning games despite the fact that he was making massive mistakes in some of these situations. If you look at these two players, what I think is really interesting from the 49ers perspective, and that's why I think it would be a coup for them if they could get Cooper back in this trade, is if you look at like yards, if you look at dot or something like that. He's a similar type of player. Brandon Aiyuk was a 13.8 A dot last season. And then when you go to Amari Cooper, it was 14.3. If you look at yards per reception, they're both near the top of the league. They were both kind of like this deep threat type of system. So, at least in a short-term basis, Cooper's old, don't get me wrong, but even some people may be surprised by the fact because he was so young when he came into the NFL, unlike Aiyuk, who was a 4-year player coming into the NFL, that we're still talking about someone right now who is entering his age 30 season, just his age 30 season. So, some potential for decline, but we'll see there. It's just he basically just did not have a great catch rate versus what Aiyuk had. His catch rate was at 56% versus Aiyuk is above 70%, but he was doing things that were very similar. He just didn't have a quarterback who could get him the ball. Now, is that his fault for not getting open, or is that a quarterback play type of situation? So the 49ers can work both of those things. I think that would be a massive W for them.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is that I don't think it's a good deal for the Browns if they have to give up a second and Cooper, right? Like that's
Yeah.
a bad trade for them.
I mean, unless they again, they think they're all going to get shipped. This is their last NFL opportunity, essentially, and they have tried to do this thing in the past. If you look at other moves that they've made without success so far, at least. I mean, they got Elijah Moore because so they're missing picks because of the Deshaun Watson deal. In addition to this $63 million cap hit this season for Deshaun Watson, they're missing picks. So they attempted to build receiver core. They said, okay, we're going to do a second and a third pick swap for Elijah Moore. What have you gotten out of that? Not a whole lot. We're going to trade for Jerry Jeudy now here at the end of his contract and give him a mid-tier extension, which again, a backloaded mid-tier extension, only giving up a 5th and 6th round pick. This would be a little bit different. Maybe they can bridge the gap that much with Amari Cooper, and that's what they're trying to do, is keep trade compensation down by, again, trying to do this more of a swap-ish sort of deal with minimizing trade compensation. But that they've been trying to do this and hasn't had a lot of success. We'll see how Jerry Jeudy does this season.
Man, Jeudy, they had that trade won, and if they had just let Jeudy play out the year and then figured out what they got in their system with Jeudy, and then if it didn't work, they would have come out so far ahead with the 3 comp or the 4 comp, whatever they got. Whatever it would have been great. It would have solved the trade, made it a huge win for them. And then they had the optionality. They could have signed him if he was great, but instead they did it early. Those are, and I'm all for players getting paid. Don't get me wrong, but I think there's a middle ground here, like the Jordan Love middle ground, where teams and players can win. And in this case, no one believed in Jeudy. They seemed to believe in him. They traded for him. They had enough kind of like credibility with the player to say, hey, look, just show out. We'll be here to pay you. He didn't need to pay this year. And they could have left some optionality for the team, which is better for the team, by just letting him play out this final year. So anyway, because of that, I agree with you that if they do trade for Aiyuk, they're going to give him a big contract. They're going to pay the 28. million a year, 29, 30, whatever that he wants. And I think that's a bad trade for them, especially if they have to give up a 2. For the Niners, I agree with you. Cooper's probably a drop-in replacement. The cap savings, the cash this year doesn't really help them. I mean, they go from paying Ayuk 18 million guaranteed to what minimum, league minimum for Cooper.
I think it's between
They're
1 and
already
2 million. Yeah. It's all been deferred to void years.
yeah. So for them, it frees up cap this year, but I just don't know what they're going to do with it. So I don't know that it helps them in the same way that a Cooper trade later down the road might help a team that's trying to make a push for the playoffs, who doesn't have a lot of cap space, might be willing to give up some pretty premium picks.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting also about the 49ers perspective, their perspective is we don't want to extend this guy. We have a championship window. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. The effect on like what this 1 year championship window, how much it matters if you're really are built to win now sort of situation. Um, bringing in a 30-year-old wide receiver, yeah, sure. There's some chance that he cliff dives right now. But typically bigger receivers have cliff dived earlier than smaller, which is maybe somewhat counterintuitive. You think that the big guys would be able to just like play box out ball, but that hasn't been the case historically in the NFL. Um, so if like 1 year of Amari Cooper just in his age 30 season, that's a great bridge, right? If you were only going to have Ayuk for potentially one season otherwise. Now, they could have kept Ayuk, franchised him next year, and then traded him off of the franchise. So there is like some flexibility where it's not as if their only alternative with Ayuk was keep him for the season, let him walk, and then get back a 3rd-round compensatory pick another year out into the future. So they did have that sort of option with him.
And I think that's actually the most likely scenario. I think the most likely scenario is he stays with San Francisco because he is getting paid. This is a huge bump in money for him. Like, first of all, he was getting, I think his signing bonus was like 8, and he was getting paid a few
Yeah,
million.
he was the end of the 1st round, and yeah, these contracts decay significantly. So there's not as big of a difference between end of the 1st round and in the middle of the 3rd round as there is between end of the 1st round and beginning of the 1st round.
Right. The majority of his contract is being paid this year, 18 or 19 million in P5. So like this is a big year for him either way. He's going to be happy. I mean, his lifestyle is going to change markedly. So like from his perspective, like he's trying to get that, just a little bit more, 10 million more a year. And I don't think that's a problem. I think you should try what you go for it. But I think at the end of the day, the Niners are kind of saying, here's what the market is saying. No one wants to pay you this right now. Come play for us. Let's win a championship. We'll talk to you next year. We'll see where the numbers are. Otherwise, we could franchise you. Otherwise, you can go and test the free market on your own. I think that ultimately is going to be how it shakes out, in my opinion.
Now, the Patriots, the weird thing about adding the Patriots in there is, I mean, I did say I thought that they were the most logical team from their perspective of wanting to have him. I mean, again, going beyond the 49ers and their particular situation. But at the same point in time, now the story that's being told out there and the reliability of this, again, we don't know how much of this is the 49ers talking about it, agents talking about it, whoever's, how much they're negotiating with teams in the media now at this point, because, these trades could just happen, right? Without it having to be reported on all these things. We're kind of dealing with a little bit of negotiating in the media here. This whole thing of, oh, well, we could either get Amari. We need it. We could only have the Browns or the Patriots because we could get Amari Cooper back. And I'm like, okay, I get that. Or we can get Kendrick Bourne back, where it's like, I get it. The guy was on the 49ers. You might like him. He's coming off an ACL. He's actually not even that much younger than Amari Cooper right now. Obviously, doesn't have the pedigree. He's not the type of player. The contract is not even any better. Like, that whole thing doesn't necessarily make much sense to me. That doesn't seem like really anything coming back as far as filling that hole and building depth in the receiver group, which you might be concerned about because it's not as if Deebo Samuel has been an Iron Man so far in his career.
Yeah, sometimes out of shape, sometimes not giving all effort.
He's locked in this year, though. When they're
Locked in.
negotiating with the other guy, that's one other thing I was going to mention about Ayuk. You might like psychologically, you might say, well, he's getting this huge pay bump, but I think locker room dynamics, and again, I haven't been there making millions of dollars, so I'm guessing here, but I can imagine like last year, he's having this career year. He's getting feted by everyone for having such a great year, Ayuk. he's sitting there, he's getting his weekly paycheck. You know, they pay you per game, right? It's coming in. And he has Deebo Samuel sitting next to him, and he's like, what the fuck? Like, this guy is making like legitimately 10 times the amount of money that I'm making right now, and I'm a better player. So I wonder if that is part of the motivation too of him not being really satisfied with getting a bump here. Is he's like, this is bullshit. Like, I am a better player and I deserve that money.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Interesting tweet from Mike Silver. I'm going to read it because it's just so bizarre. In a vacuum, I feel like Kyle Shanahan would rather have Kendrick Bourne and the Patriots 2 than Amari Cooper and the Browns 2. I mean, if that reflects Kyle Shanahan's actual thinking.
First of all, I don't know much about Mike Silver. I don't follow him. But I will say I don't think he's the most independent and, you know, has the highest integrity when it comes to some of these things. I think he's had a very close very close relationship with teams, with the mostly on the team side, not on the player side.
He was
This
big with Hugh,
this
right? Him and Hugh
yeah,
went
yeah,
way back, right?
he and Hugh were best friends. Steve Kerr, supposedly he's good friends with Steve Kerr, so he's had some like, you know, Warriors apology stuff going on there. Whatever. I generally I wouldn't. I mean, this sounds like he's just mouthpiecing, right? He's just I mean, he's literally mouthpiecing. He's almost telling you he's mouthpiecing. I don't buy that for a second. I put that under the lie detector test. It's going crazy. That thing is breaking. The glass is smashing on that thing. If you think that is the case, because again, and maybe this would be a good transition to talk about it. The 49ers want to win a championship this year. You think fucking Kyle Shanahan wants to be like, well, you know, this raises our probability of winning in 2025 and 2026. No, this guy is like obsessed. He probably can't sleep at night properly until he gets that championship. And you want Brandon Aiyuk there to win that championship this year.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Again, back to why I think that he stays. But like, so I was looking at the Patriots and doing some show prep, and
yeah,
they picked Drake May, of course, and they shipped off Mac Jones. And interesting, the 2021 QBs, they've all been traded. All of them, except for Trevor Lawrence. Zach Wilson went to, and a 7th, went to Denver for a 6. Mac went to Jacksonville for a 6. Fields went to Pittsburgh for a 6 that can convert to a 4 for 51% of the snaps if he plays. And Trey Lance went to Dallas for a 4. So Trey Lance, I guess he was the highest of them that isn't Trevor Lawrence, highest pick of the 2021 draft. But the fact that they got a 4 for him is just an incredible fleecing of Dallas by San Francisco. I think I saw some recent tweets of, you know, really bad throws by Lawrence, or excuse me, not Lawrence, of Trey Lance, like throwing interceptions to guys because he doesn't see the defender and all this kind of stuff. And people are saying, "Wow, what an overpay for a 4th." I disagree with that. I still think it was good process by Dallas, but just interesting that he was the quarterback out of all of those who got the most compensation in trade value.
Well, it's interesting that they get any compensation in trade value, quite honestly, because these are like glorified cuts, right? Like the teams don't want these guys on their roster. Now they get a high enough signing bonus that their contracts are not that high, but there are guarantees in their contracts, which prevents teams from just outright cutting them, and then they end up doing these trades instead, and then the teams that are acquiring them take on a guaranteed salary, which is so low that they don't really necessarily care about. Well, but back to 49ers for a second. So this is how I'm looking at them. According to numbers that Ben Baldwin put together, which I'd referenced before in comparison to my own power rankings, and I have similar numbers for the 49ers, that they are at 5.2 points right now above average for their power rating, according to what the Vegas Lions say for the first couple weeks of the season. The next best team in the NFC is 2.7 points. The next best team overall is the Chiefs, who are, you know, 3.5-ish, but still quite a ways off from the 49ers. So when you're in that sort of position, when you're not only seen as being the best team in the NFL, you're seen as being significantly at the beginning of the season, substantially, materially better than everyone else. It's not just like a rank ordering that could change that quickly. Probably won't even change unless there's a few games of the season that go forward. You're in the NFC where The second best team is the Detroit Lions, and whatever, the Lions have a solid squad, but this is not the Bills. This is not Mahomes. This is not Josh Allen. This is not Joe Burrow. This is not, this is Jared Goff we're talking about here. How does that change your calculus? Are you feeling like, well, we really want to push in to maximize that advantage that we have right now to get to the Super Bowl and win? Or do you feel like you have more room to take on risk, gain the compensation, which will boost your chances in the future because you have that margin right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a good answer. I think I can tell you what I would do, and we talked about this last show, and I would try and plan a little bit more for the future. But as you alluded to with Shanahan, I think he's obsessed with winning. I think him and McVay are they're unhealthily obsessed with winning, and I think the fact that he hasn't sealed the deal yet is eating at him, and so I think he does whatever it takes to win this year. I think that's why they paid CMC so much money when they didn't absolutely need to do that. I'm pulling up my Super
Well,
Bowl
I guess I
probabilities.
forgot
I don't
about
think it's
CMC when I was listing off the 49ers and all of their different cap commitments. So again, that's another guy you throw to the mix, is what makes it more difficult to extend Ayuk.
exactly. So they made all these choices, and I understand also from Ayuk's perspective. I mean, that would piss me off, right? You're paying all these other guys when I was your best receiver on the team, and I would say I would make the argument if I was Ayuk, I'm the one that made Purdy, right? Yeah, your scheme's great, Kyle, but it wasn't CMC, it wasn't his dump offs. I was out there making these big splash plays. You need me to make the offense go, and you're out here paying all these other guys, and you're not building around me. I feel disrespect. I feel disrespected, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's all playing into it for sure.
What do you think about? And I was thinking of this whole hold in phenomenon that goes on with these players. Should there be any shift in attitude for teams which generally they don't want to ruffle too many feathers? They want to probably keep a fairly positive temperature when it comes to how other players view them and how they do their negotiations and how adversarial they are. But like, at what point do you say to Ayuk, these hold-ins are over, and we're gonna say that you don't have a stub toe or whatever nonsense is being said for why you're holding in, and we're gonna start fining you for not showing up.
Mm, I don't know. I think that's a case by case basis. I don't think a wide receiver is the guy that you start messing with in that fashion. They're uh, they're volatile. I don't know that, especially in this
Yeah, the
case. I
tweets,
think,
the tweets that'll come out, the Instagram captions will be
yeah. What
will
was
be
his last
something.
one? See California, and he was in a plane or something. He was probably just
Yeah.
traveling, but it doesn't matter. His trolling is going to be next level if you start finding him for faking a toe injury. In fact, I don't even know if the CBA allows for that kind of stuff. You say you're injured, I don't think. I think you're beyond reproach. Basically, I don't think there's
Yeah,
anything.
I guess we'll see on that one. And one other thing, like I was just thinking quickly before we start to get into some questions that we're getting here, and it'll prompt some more discussion. Is like, could you just by default say wide receivers are overpaid now a little bit after this multi-year bump that we've seen? So, like, if I'm even thinking, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Maybe you just don't do it just for that reason, with that assumption that you could probably invest some resources somewhere else.
So, but again, we talked about this last week. I think the specifics of the team matter here, and I don't think wide receivers are overpaid in the right situations with the right quarterbacks. They're just not. They're unevenly distributed. Like we're talking about, some of these, you know, like so many players have gone and played with Mahomes, these, first round draft picks, Sky Moore, whoever, and they haven't panned out. I think the talent in the league is not on the right teams currently. But I think that the idea of paying wide receivers is legitimate. I just don't think teams are getting the proper value out of their wide receivers currently. And so for a lot of teams, paying 30 million is not the right call. That makes sense. So it's kind of this, it's context dependent. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I have the 49ers finally pulled up my playoffs. So I have them as a Super Bowl 10% chance of winning the Super Bowl. So whatever. Yeah, I don't think that's enough to completely throw away the future. Whereas I have like Kansas City a 16%, where that's a team where I would actually pull the trigger on a really, really good intermediate receiving weapon, intermediate to deep. And I know that they
that's interesting because right, they're the case that people were trying to use after this last Super Bowl victory as the example of why maybe you don't want to pay a wide receiver because they didn't and they won. I mean, I think the biggest mistake there is like they weren't that good during the regular season. I know they had an awesome playoffs, but like, passing the ball, but they were struggling, a lot during the regular season. But then again, Mahomes won the MVP the year before. So
I was at the game where they lost to the Broncos. I It was my second time watching Patrick Mahomes in person, and he looked awful. Like he looked awful. Did not know what was going on, and that was not a bang up team last year for Denver. Um, it was dispiriting. Like that was not what I expected out of the Chiefs. Like all year long, obviously, and I'm like I had some money on them. I had a lot of fantasy equity in those offensive players and Kelsey, and so I had lots of rooting interest here. But I was just deeply disappointed. I think definitely going to be better this year, but I don't think they addressed all their concerns on offense, especially. So we'll see. I think last I read was that Kelsey's going to be running fewer routes again. That's the plan.
I mean, he's getting fat and old now. I mean, he's got that. If you're trying to lock down that billionaire money, I mean, come on, you can't be putting in full effort on the
No,
football
no,
field. I'm sorry.
Exactly right. Exactly right. He's got his pod. He's got a lot of things going on right now. He's a man of many talents. He's probably going to have lots of offers afterwards to be on shows and things. So more power to him. But I think they're going to try to slow roll him, and hopefully he gets hot in the playoffs again, just like last year. And so I don't see him being a target hog again this year. So then that opens up the question: where are those intermediate targets going? And I don't know. I really don't know right now. Do you? Do you have an idea?
I don't know. I don't know about intermediate, but the deep targets. Xavier Worthy, I guess. I think I could probably press the guy a little bit on the line of scrimmage. So we'll see. We'll see how it ends up in the NFL season. I've been doing a little lifting recently, so maybe I could get in
Wow.
there and
Yeah,
do something. But
soccer has really got you feeling your
hey,
earth.
I got to be able. It's physical, more physical game than you might think. All right, let's take some of these questions here, and we can get into whatever else. Okay, this is. Do the Niners really think that? 'Cause this is from Jonas here. Did the Niners really think they can aggregate Ayuk's value? I sent you his value per play stats in 2023 on X yesterday. Well, thank you. I'll have to check to see if I got those value per play stats. But yeah, as I mentioned, he is the like value per guy, right? He is the DVOA guy, which is basically a yards per target. If you want to translate it, it would be like yards per target with a bonus for touchdowns and first down sort of situation. He is that guy. Can they aggregate that? I mean, the question would be like, they cannot aggregate what he did last season, but can they aggregate what he was going to do this season is a lot easier because it's probably not going to be as good as he did last season. So that's really the question. Is the fact that he's a deeper threat more difficult then as far as the aggregation is concerned and trying to replace that for the 49ers?
Yeah, I think I agree with you that he's not as good as he was last year. The problem is that the pieces that they might be trading for, like Cooper just had a career year, I think. And so he's probably not going to be as good either. Plus he's older. Maybe that's where this whole idea of the Patriots is coming in, that they might feel like that's a rising player rather than but again, no, you keep Ayuk. I think his best fit this year is on the 49ers. And unless they get an amazing offer, they're just going to have to navigate this drama. And, look, at the end of the day, I think Brandon shows up to play. He's going to be making a bunch of money this year, and it's all guaranteed. So I'm not crying for him. He's going to get paid one way or another. And I think his best chance at a Super Bowl is this year. So I think that's where it ends.
Yeah, no, one of the risks is actually reminding one of the risks from a job security / perception, media perception is, again, Brandon Aiyuk in 2024, more likely than not guaranteed by any stretch, more likely than not, is not going to be as efficient and as valuable as Brandon Aiyuk 2023, right? But if you trade him away, and then your team is not as good this season as they were last season, even if they're in line with what your expectation may have been for this season, if you lose some games, if something happens, there is going to be a negative contingency then with the media getting on your case for the fact that you traded away this guy. Maybe even if he's not that good, even if he's not that good someplace else, people might still say, well, if he would have stayed here, he would have done what he did last season.
Mm, mm. So you manage out of worrying about the media, so out of fear.
No,
I
I'm
don't
saying
know.
that's a consideration. That's a consideration. I mean, so here's like I'll give a pure numbers based example for what is probably lost in a lot of these discussions. Again, I said that the 49ers, according to the power rankings this year, they haven't gotten any worse, I don't think, at any position really this year. They're a really strong team. 5.2 points better than the average team going into this year. Last year, they ended the season 8.9 points better than the average team because we just knew more about them. We knew more about the opponents, and we were more confident that they were really good. So, like, the team is projected to be worse versus the rest of the NFL, no matter what they do this season. So that's kind of a consideration, I think, to keep in mind, which,
There you go.
most people probably say, oh, we were, whatever they were last season. What were they, like 14-3 or something like that? And if we finish worse than that, then we didn't do as well this season. That sort of expectation.
Well, I think the expectation is Super Bowl, though, right? I mean,
Yes.
the record is far less important than if you make it to the championship and win. Um, so I don't know what isn't it disappointing either way? Like if you don't win, if you're Shanahan this year, I mean, it doesn't really matter what players you had on the team. If you don't win, I don't think you're pointing at any one specific move. I think you're just the overarching narrative from the media is going to be Shanahan can't get it done. He had all the players. He luck boxed into the cheapest starting quarterback in the league, who turned out to be maybe a top third of the league QB. Um, they were able to build a team, a super team around that cheap quarterback, and he still couldn't win the big one. So I think that's the narrative. At least that's the narrative I find more interesting, rather than like worrying about if or if not Aiyuk was moved.
Okay, so Dry Defender asked whether or not the important factor is trading for Ayuk is whether or not the team could give up a first round pick, or do you just not have faith in teams to accurately make that assessment? You sound like you're very much. I mean, the number, the picks that you were throwing out, and maybe you're correct. We're very much not in the first round pick sort of game. Again, AJ Brown was a first round pick, but then there was also kind of some swappage going on there for what was going on. Um, Tyreek Hill was a true big deal for a first round pick, for multiple high round picks. Um, do you think that threshold can be crossed? I mean, I guess we're both kind of saying no, right, on the first round pick.
I think so, because that's the reason why you're seeing all these players come into the equation, is because people don't want teams don't want to part with a first round pick for a guy they're going to have to pay big money to. Um, it could happen. It could happen. I don't like, from my perspective, it's a bad trade if you do it that way. I mean, that's just not something. That's not a smart way to build a team. Trade away your first and then pay big money to a wide receiver. Like, I mean, it's a premium position. Don't get me wrong, but like as we've stated, like Ayuk probably isn't deserving of top of the market money. Probably he could, and again, depending on the team situation. Like again, if we're talking about going to Kansas City and if you have the funds, like that could pay off. But a lot of these teams that are in the mix, like New England, is a fit for a lot of reasons, financially and contracts and all the rest. Um, I wouldn't want the compensation coming back from, unless it was a first, if I was San Francisco. And I don't think you do much with Ayuk on the Patriots. Like I don't think it moves the needle too terribly much, unless May becomes the starter early on and turns out to be a CJ Stroud type. So I don't know. It's tough. So I guess the answer to the question is no. I don't think there's firsts on the table. I think we're seeing that show up in the trade offers, and I think because of that, I think the Niners are correct to not make the trade.
Yeah, I mean, a first from the Patriots in particular would mean, first overall pick is like on the is potential, right? Is within your realm, within the range of possibilities. And your expected value would be much higher with the 49ers than if you're trading with the Browns, and then also with the Steelers, who are probably more going to be more of a middling team, no matter the situation. But also your variance in value would be much higher. And that's you should always be banking on. I feel like that sort of thing when we're talking about making a pick. So yeah, that would if they could get that, if Bourne in a first round pick, or not even Bourne, forget Bourne, just get
Yeah,
that first
forget
round
boring.
pick, then let's do it. Okay. Not talking about Ayuk here, but going to some other questions. Another one from Dry Defender here. Do you think there's an inefficiency where teams could trade bad QBs sooner and get more trade value for them? Or are teams bumping up against the risk that they bail on somebody that's good? I mean, there's obviously a risk that they're bailing on someone that's good, but I think what we're talking about and what you had mentioned with Trey Lance is you could get a little bit more juice getting rid of them early than you probably can waiting for their last season. And yeah, I mean, I tend to be someone who thinks that holding on to quarterbacks too long is more of a problem than giving up on them too early, which doesn't mean you eliminate the possibility that they turn around. There's always some possibility that they turn around, but just on average, that's the case.
I think in their heart of hearts, coaches know pretty quick what this guy is. They want to be sure, they don't want to make errors in judgment, but they have an idea. And I think the quicker you can get to that decision, say, so you have two, right? So they say again, you're always drafting quarterbacks. You figure out which one you want to bet on, and it's always going to be a bet, and it's always going to be uncomfortable. But then you play it close to the vest, and you treat the other guy like the first, at least to the outside world, and then you start making noises to other GMs saying, "Look, we have this quandary. I want to get my ass out of this sling. This quarterback controversy. It's going to eat up my team. I need to get rid of this guy. What could you give me? He's fantastic. We love his talent. I need one of these guys to go." And I think you get a little bit more value that way rather than showing the world his ass and showing that he's not good, showing that he's obviously the plan B or C or D, or you may just end up cutting him at some point. I mean, that's where you drain all the value out of the equation. So yeah, I think there's better ways to do it. Obviously, the way I described, isn't perfect. If you had a sharp GM on the other end, just he's going to say, well, you're stuck. I'll give you less then, okay. So that didn't work out. There's lots of potholes in the strategy, but I still think there are better ways of doing it than showing everyone which one is absolutely better than the other and which one is worse, and then trying to deal the worst one.
Yeah, I mean, Trey Lance theoretically had more upside because of the fact that we hadn't seen him as much as we had seen Wilson and Mac Jones. And I think that's why they got the fourth round pick. And it might not sound that significant, but a trade swap or getting, I think, a sixth round pick, it actually is a pretty big difference. Like fourth round is right on the cusp of where you can really not always, of course, find a starting caliber sort of player, but there's like a decent chance of getting a guy who can contribute in the fourth round. Once you get into the fifth, sixth, seventh round, it gets a little bit more squirrely. You're more you're really throwing darts, and that's that sort of situation. All right,
Yeah,
this is for. Go ahead.
just wanted to finish. The end of the third, the beginning of the fourth is where the curve really starts to flatten out, and all those picks on an expected value basis are pretty much equal.
Okay, so last question here for Hermsmeyer here, calling out Josh Hermsmeyer. Well, I'll say he's calling out. I don't think it actually is. Max K says during one of the previous pods, Josh said that he doesn't believe that there to be any sharp NFL franchises. If he were hired as GM, something I don't necessarily see happening, but you never know what can happen. Does he believe he could run a sharp organization? So yeah, that's a good question. Because I feel like even like theoretically, I feel like I could run a sharp organization. Actually, I'm not a good manager, so I probably would just be bad. You'd have to put me in the corner office. You just come to me and I just say, "Don't do that." I have that role. But do you feel like you could run a sharp organization, or does the politics, the media, the pressures of everyone around in the organization make that an impossibility, even for someone who is a stone cold sociopath like Josh Hermsmeyer able to come in there and do this?
So, I mean, it's a complicated question. What is a sharp organization? But I think that we talked about the principal agent problem, and a sharp organization requires an owner with buy-in, right? who will cover your moves, and then you need to have a GM who's sharp. So if you have those two things, absolutely. So
How do you
if I was
incentivize a GM okay, so how much of being sharp is short-termism, as we talked about this principal agent sort of thing? Like, could you say to a GM, you're gonna have compensation, like you're gonna have some sort of balloon payments down the road based upon how well this team does in 5 years, 6 years, whether you're here or not? What about something like that?
that would work. I think more than anything, what you need is the owner to say very clearly, we're doing things a certain way, and the GM is going to be the one who that's the strategy, and the GM is going to do the tactics. And the tactics are going to be, we're going to build out this department, we're going to evaluate this way, we are going to use data in this way, and the coaching is going to accept this type of feedback, and these are the way the reporting is going to be handled, this is the structure, and now the GM is going to execute on this vision. And if that's the case, then everyone will snap in line because the owner ultimately is paying everyone's salary. So uh, the pushback would I believe end at that point. Then the hard part becomes, can you attract top talent at head coach, and a head coach that can build out a winning organization underneath him. That's a key part of this. And so finding that guy is really, really difficult. And I don't think, and this is another part of where I'm saying there's not really sharp teams, is because I don't think the hiring process for head coaches is very efficient either. So I think all of this together, the HR problems, the upper management problems, they all kind of coalesce into a mediocre organization of really smart people, right? And what you want to do is get that out of the way and allow the sharp people to rise, promote within, allow them to leave, right? So that you attract new talent in because they think they can use you as a stepping stone. There are some organizations that suppress their talent out of fear of losing instead of. I think the Eagles are one of the best. Instead of criticizing, I'll just talk about who's the best. The Eagles are one of the best at like spreading their seeds throughout the league and like seeing people win and leave and grow their careers. I think that model is probably a winning one.
Howie is, spreading his seed? I just
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think it's more of a lurie. It's
he's the
more of a
Elon
lurie
Musk
thing than a Howie
of
thing.
the NFL?
The diaspora, yeah. So no, but I think it's those things. It's multifactorial. I think you need the owner to go ahead and kind of give you cover. You need to have a
How
GM
do
who
you keep
knows what
the
they're
owner
doing.
aligned, though? How do you even keep the owner aligned? Isn't that part of the
Well, he
problem
just
or
has
not?
to want it. He just has to
Yeah.
want that to be the case, right? He has to want to be a
These guys
winning
don't
team
like
rather than
showing up
just.
at the country club, though, having their friends razz them about the fact that their teams stink.
Well, I'm not saying tank. Like I don't think. I think a year reset is fine, but like
Okay.
multi-year tanking doesn't work. I think we've proven that in the NFL. So you don't need to do that. You don't need to embarrass your owner for half a decade. So I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
yeah. So I think 1 year everyone can sit through a bad year. Any owner can do that. And then the question is, can you attract the talent inside your building as in the front office? Can you hire good coaching? And they build out their offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and their staffs. And then can you allow people to leave in a way that attracts new people in, right? You allow people to grow in the organization so that when they leave, other people, new talent, fresh talent, will want to be attracted to your organization because they see you as a stepping stone to career growth. So I think those are the tenets of what I think a sharp organization could look like.
All right, you heard it here. All the owners who are listening in, you can find Josh on Signal if you want to if you want to have some
Actually, you
clandestine
can't. That's the whole point.
clandestine conversations. Get in contact with me. I'll give you all of his information. I'll dox him, whatever you potentially need for him on there. All right, Herms. What we got? Anything else? I linked to some of your stuff that you were putting out early on the Air Yard Substack there. Anything else coming out you wanna talk about before we discuss next week? I think we're gonna talk quarterbacks and get into the rest of the season. What else you got going on?
Launching the model after week 2. It'll be cool this year. I'm going to have an optimizer. So basically all the guys will be preloaded into an optimizer. So you can just go ahead and do correlation stacks with the buy low model players and pump out some lineups really, really easily. You don't have to go to another site to do it. So that'll be just an efficiency gain, So anyway, cool little perk of the model this year.
All right, man. Thanks for the time, Josh. Thanks for everyone tuning in. The questions on there. We'll be back at you next week. I might do a solo deal later this week. We have a guest next week, especially if there's an Ayuk story, because I don't think we want to like have the same exact discussion next week again if something actually happens, and maybe just build on a little bit of what we talked here if something actually does happen. If it doesn't happen by the end of the week, I'm just going to assume that nothing's going to happen because it makes no sense. Once you already have the parties involved all aware of who's there and who's not there, it should probably break sooner than later, if not never. Otherwise, I'll be talking to everyone later this week, and thanks so much for tuning in.